And take your Bibles, if you would, and let's go to Nehemiah chapter 4. We finally got out of chapter 3. And so we now can continue on. And I will say this, though we finished up chapter 3, which describes the building of the walls and the building of the different gates, and whether it's repairing of gates or it's just the gates that are mentioned as everything is being repaired for the protection of the people in Jerusalem. As we finished up that chapter that describes all that, we come to chapter 4. And chapter 4 is not a time frame of continuance of everything's finished. Now let's look at what happens after. No. Chapter 4 actually steps back and presents to us what they faced while seeking to accomplish the job of rebuilding. And so it wasn't just a matter of, hey, everybody's got their job, everybody's building here, building there, repairing this and repairing that. Let's just all get it done. Woohoo! Ain't God good? Oh, that's all good and wonderful. The children of Israel were excited, but in the midst of that, chapter 4 presents to us what the people of God faced in Jerusalem as they tried to do what they were called to do in that moment. They're trying to accomplish the task that pleases the Lord, that is meant for them, the rebuilding of the walls, the rebuilding of the gates, the protection of the city of Jerusalem and the temple where they worship the Lord. And in the midst of doing what is their responsibility to do, that God has given them opportunity now to accomplish, in the midst of that, it's not smooth sailing. And chapter 4 presents to us the opposition that they face while trying to do what is right before the Lord. And the representation for us tonight, I'll just give you this aspect, is the representation for us tonight, and the example it is for us, is to understand as we today seek to rebuild or seek to build up. The Bible talks about keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. That word keep is to guard and protect. It's to build boundaries, build walls, build protections about that which is important, that part of you that is going to make decisions to live for God or live for self. Build protections about. But here's the thing, every time you and I seek to do what honors God, what pleases God, what is obedient to God, it's not going to happen through smooth sailing. Every time. Now, you're going to have moments where it seems easy. You're going to have moments where, man, things are going great. And about the time that you think you've hit calm waters, all of a sudden, you get banged up against the rock somewhere, or you have a storm off in the distance. You hear a rumble in the background. Oh, great. I just came out of all that. But it doesn't fail. Whenever you seek to do what is right before the Lord, whenever you and I seek to do what would please God, and by the way, what we're called to be and do according to the Word of God, every time, you might as well just mark her down. You're going to face some opposition. You're going to face difficulties. And sometimes it comes in a form of people around you. Sometimes it comes in the form of circumstances that just happen to hit. Sometimes it's of our own doings because we're too dumb to seek the Lord first. And so we try to do it because we thought we got it figured out, and then we make a big mess out of it. And so we face opposition and problems because I knew better. And I just didn't do better, okay? Now I got to step back and I got to correct this and deal with what I'm dealing with. But I gave myself more work because I just didn't seek the Lord first. And so all these things can happen, but some of the most obvious things that can happen to us is the opposition because we have an adversary. As a child of God, trying to please the Lord, trying to do what is right, trying to be an example and trying to have a good testimony and a godly character before a lost and dying world, and even godly character amongst God's people. By the way, I'll just tell you now, it's harder to have godly character amongst God's people sometimes than it is the world. because I don't expect much different from the world. I do expect a lot different from God's people than sometimes what I receive. And so it's hard not to fire back with the flesh and contain myself and act like a mature Christian. Sometimes it can be hard, okay? But we're going to face opposition. Our adversary does not want God's people doing things God's way in order to receive the blessings of the Lord on that which we have done and that which we seek to accomplish. The last thing Satan wants to see is Bethel Baptist Church go anywhere for God. Last thing he wants to see is Bethel Baptist Church reaching families with truth. The last thing he wants to see in the school, the church, or any other part of the ministry is for anything to have the blessings of the hand of God and flourish for the glory of God. So what's he going to do? You say, we're going to put our hand to the work. And Satan says, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it as heavy as it can possibly be on you. We're gonna put our mind to getting something done for God. And Satan says, and I'm going to put as many obstacles in your way to slow you down to a turtle's crawl, if I possibly can. And so we find in chapter 4, that's exactly what the children of Israel face. They are in the process of building. They are in the middle of what chapter 3 is describing. And in the midst of that, a man by the name of Sanballat starts up in his opposition, and he, of course, naturally, Karen always gains a few people to go along with her. Come on, y'all can laugh. We don't have any Karens in here, right? So it's like this. I have an Aunt Karen. That's dangerous. I got to be careful. But you have Sanballat, and he is the first one to step forward. He is the first one to make mockery of what's happening. And so let's look at what takes place here, because in Nehemiah chapter 4, we find this great opposition. And the conflict we find, it strengthens with an addition of conspiracy. The Bible's full of great conspiracy stories all the time. And so here is a conspiracy. There's a constant work behind the scenes to find some way to stop God's people from accomplishing something that would benefit them and glorify their God. And so conflict with conspiracy increases. By the way, with Sanballat, it's things that start in the heart and then it comes out in word. Okay, let's look at this at verse 1 and verse number 2. It says, but it came to pass that when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, he was wroth and took great indignation and mocked the Jews. And he spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, what do these feeble Jews? Now, he's just throwing out insults constantly, okay? He mocks them. Now he's calling them these feeble Jews. Zero respect for the Jewish people. By the way, that is what they had produced as a testimony in their life. They were willing to be weak in the eyes of everyone. They stood for nothing. They fought for nothing. At this point, until Nehemiah comes in, they've been working on the temple, but nobody's been challenging them to stand up, stand out, do something that matters. They've just been meandering and surviving. And the people around them, it's very evident, have zero respect for the strength of the Israelites. These Jews are weak. They're pathetic. They're laughable. Look at these poor little pipsqueaks trying to rebuild a wall. And so he makes fun of them. And he speaks to all of his people around him and talks about the feeble Jews. Will they fortify themselves? Here they go. Will they sacrifice? Now here's the thing. He attacks them personally. He attacks their ability, and then he attacks their worship. So he makes fun of them, he makes fun of their attempt, and then he makes fun of what they want to do it for, their purpose. Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end in a day? And then, of course, oh, by the way, we probably won't finish chapter 4 tonight. I'm just telling you right now. There's too much to break down in this, okay? So my intent was to go through the whole chapter, but I can't do it. I just can't. There's too much. So he says this, will they end in a day? By the way, have you ever noticed when somebody wants to make an accusation against someone who's doing good, they always use the most ridiculous accusation possible? It's just dumb. He's making fun of them, and so what does he do? What are they going to do? They're going to rebuild everything in a day? Well, who said they were going to rebuild everything in a day? They never claimed that. So, but here's what he's doing. He's going to the absurd in order to insult and make them look bad. You know, everybody's like, oh yeah, who do they think they are? Now, by the way, that's what happens. Nobody said from the Israelites, from the Jews, no one claimed, even Nehemiah did not claim they were going to rebuild everything in a day. No one said that. Nobody even thinks that. That's crazy. They're going to have to do the work, and it's going to take time. But they're going to do it until it's finished. Now, Sanballat's going to go, and he basically presents through his words an accusation as though the Jews think they're going to rebuild their fortifications in a day and save themselves in one day. Well, nobody ever said that. But by the way, everybody who hears Sanballat talking, he now has a talking point that has no basis in fact, but you're going to have a whole group of people jump on board and start mocking them for thinking they're going to build it in a day. They never said they were going to build it in a day. But now you're going to have a whole group of people accusing them of being ridiculous. Is that not the way the world works? It is. It doesn't have to be true. All it's got to be is an accusation that a few other people say, oh, that's what you heard? Oh, well, ain't that funny? Boy, those people are stupid. Those people are dumb. I tell you what, those Christians think they're going to do this. Listen, there are so many things out there today that the church gets accused of thinking and wanting to attempt that we've never talked about attempting. And it's not just us, but God's people in general. There are accusations about the church doing ministry because, well, I bet you that somebody will make an accusation. I bet they're doing that just because they're wanting to get more money. Well, no, actually, to do this, we're spending more than we would ever receive back. But by the way, that then spreads, and then it becomes that church only has activities for everybody because they're trying to get everybody's money. Next thing you know, more and more people start talking about that's just a greedy church. Yeah, that's like every church. Every church, just all they want is money, money, money. All them preachers ever talk about is money, money, money. Y'all ever heard that accusation? All they ever do, every time I go to church, all they ever do is talk about money. Well, when you go once a year, and you just happen to go when maybe they're raising, they're encouraging giving to missions or something like that. Okay, so you didn't tell anybody about the fact that you only go one time. But here's the thing, that then spreads a mentality that's ridiculous. And that's used to tear down and insult and try to bring a scourge upon the work of God. That's what Sanballat's doing. He is trying to attack the Jews, attack their abilities, attack their purpose for wanting to worship God, and then even make a ridiculous accusation that they never claimed. All to get people on his side to join him in the mockery of God's people. By the way, I can think of somebody else that just followed what God said to do and was mocked. Very good. For over 100 years. but mocked, made fun of. Accusations of why they were doing what they were doing because they're so prideful. Well, no, it's not pride, it's obedience. But that's the way that we face opposition. A lot of times what makes opposition difficult is not the true things that are said in mockery. It's the false, absurd things that are said that people believe. And then it becomes if you're not careful, it becomes why are we trying to reach these people? Why are we trying to serve? And don't get me wrong, we need to. But it can very easily well up within us. Why are we trying to serve our community? Look at the mockery they make. Why are we expending our energy, our time, our finances to do something for someone else when it just turns right around and we're being mocked and it's all being turned around to make it look like we're trying to gain something for ourselves and all we're doing is giving. Now, here's what Satan does. He wants God's people, number one, he wants you to get discouraged, and you and I, he wants us to get discouraged. He wants us to get down. He wants us to basically see nothing but negative. But then at the same time, he also wants us to get a bad spirit. And he wants us to get distracted. Because the very reason that we do what we do trying to reach people, if we're not careful, if we allow ourselves to get a bad spirit because of the opposition that we're facing, which is, by the way, nothing more than Satan using people like pawns. But if we are dealing with that opposition, and that opposition causes us to get a bad spirit towards that which we are called to do, we will become ineffective for the cause of Christ. And then we lose our whole purpose of being God's people, the church. And so if they could not, now you'll find in chapter 4, as we go through it, you're going to find that they use words, and then they use threats and appearances, and then they also will use plans to fully attack and just try to tear it down themselves. Whatever they have to do, but they start off with trying to just get in the heads of the Jews, get in their minds, get them discouraged, get them irritated, get them distracted, and then they'll stop the work because they're focused on something other than what they need to be focused on. And that's what Sanballat is doing. And so he goes on and he even says in verse number 4, verse number 2, the latter part, will they revive the stones out of the heaps of the rubbish which are burned? And then you have in verse number 3, you have two other individuals begin to join. And you have Tobiah the Ammonite was by him. And he said, even that which they build. Now, you have one person making fun, you're always going to have somebody join in. And here it is, Tobiah the Ammonite says, you say all that, I got one better. Even that which they build, if a fox go up, he shall break down their stone wall. Even if they get it built, a little bitty fox would walk on it and crumble. That's how pathetic they are. So now you just have people jumping on the bandwagon and just basically, if you want to get right down to it, in today's terminology, these two individuals are doing nothing more than being bullies. They are using their words, trying to cut deep into the heart of the people. And by the way, if we're not careful, they could have done the same thing that we're capable of doing, and that is actually listening to the ridiculousness and start believing in our own hearts, well, they got a point. What use is it? Nobody's interested in what we do. What's the sense in having a missions conference? Nobody cares for that kind of stuff anymore. What's the sense in having a Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night services? Everybody else is doing something different. People like that better. I mean, we just look ridiculous. By the way, people on social media do say that having so much church is ridiculous nowadays. Even Christians. because their church doesn't do it. And they love having, one service of the week. And I'm not gonna attack and all that kind of stuff. Whatever. I know years ago they used to have one service. And that's because they could only travel so far, and they went there and they spent. By the way, they didn't have one service. They had a whole day, all day long. And that preacher didn't travel all that way through all that snow and his boots icing up just to come in and have a 45-minute service and be done. So, I could argue that a lot. But as a whole, here's the thing. We've gone from a society, and yes, I'm going to chase a squirrel. Y'all get ready. We've gone from society where when they had opportunity to come together more, they gladly jumped on the opportunity. How did we end up with a Sunday morning, a Sunday night, and a Wednesday night? Because, and by the way, some places even have more often than that. Why is it? Where did revival services, where they used to go 2 weeks or greater in every single night revivals, that's almost unheard of today. But where did all that come from? It came from a people that could only do so much at some point, but then as technology gave them more opportunity and they got closer and closer to each other and they had the ability to drive cars and get places faster and it wasn't as dangerous and they had chances. Now they had more preachers and they were actually having churches established nearby. They started actually wanting to gather together even more, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. They lived by that. And that is what built the society that we enjoy the benefits from today. And now we reached the peak of it, and now we're seeing the slide down the other slope where we're wanting to go the other direction. Why do we got to have so much? Well, back then they said, why can't we have more? And we wonder why they had revival and we can't find it. It's a whole different mentality. Now, I don't think that we have to, kill ourselves going to church in order to serve God. And that, by the way, that's one of the accusations. Well, you think if we don't go to church, we can't be a good Christian. Well, I'm glad you let me know what I'm thinking. I really appreciate that, because I was completely unaware of what my brain was thinking. But as a whole, I will say this. As one as one preacher put it, here's the best way to describe what you're saying. No, I don't believe you have to go to church to be a good Christian, because it's really your personal walk with the Lord that has the greatest effect on you. But in the same turn, you don't have to go home to your wife every night on a regular basis to be married. But I sure do recommend it. Okay? What it comes down to is, well, I don't have to. Well, no, you don't. I don't have to be around. No, you don't. But you don't have to tell your wife you love her either, but it's probably a good idea that you do. And so that whole scenario, people use the most ridiculous things because here's what it comes down to. What somebody will throw in your face as an accusation is, for me, it's more of a revealing of what is convicting. They've got a problem with it because it's causing them a problem. And they have to attack the one who's doing what they believed is to be done for the Lord. They're in obedience to God. They got to attack because you're making me feel bad. How dare you? And then you don't have to say a word, but now you're judgmental just because you do what you do. You're now judging me. This is what Sanballat and Tobiah and them are frustrated about. They're okay as long as the Jews are broken down, pathetic, and a mockery in society. But as soon as they start doing anything that shows that they can be obedient to God and the Lord will bless them and there are benefits to it and they are a people that can honor the Lord, as soon as that starts happening, all of a sudden Sanballat gets mad. Tobiah gets mad. And all these other people around them, well, they just get irritated because how dare y'all try to rebuild your walls? Why would we not? Well, who do you think you are trying to protect yourself against us? Why would we not? So again, the attack in reality is done through quite ridiculous manners. The accusations are ridiculous and over the top, but they are used as a way to try to attack the thinking and the mindsets of God's people and drive fear into them. Because once they can't get them discouraged, then the next thing they end up doing is trying to threaten. Oh, so making fun of you doesn't work? Okay, let's go ahead. We're going to threaten. We're going to shut you down. You just try that. You just try to take a stand on that. We'll shut you down. That's the kind of threats that they're giving. And by the way, it's the same stuff the world does today to anyone trying to serve the Lord. And by the way, I'll say this, and I'm going to get to a close point for tonight, but it should not shock us when this happens. And by the way, we ought to be very careful getting that irritation towards a lost world that's doing what a lost world does. Our job is to reach them with the gospel. Our job is to show grace and mercy to the best of our ability through the strength of Christ, because we don't have that strength in ourselves. What I have is a reaction, and it probably won't go well. What wells up inside of me many times, it's not something that I need to let be seen, because it's not going to represent Christ. And all it's going to do is give somebody who wants to make accusation some legitimate ammunition to shoot back. Right now, they've been firing blanks just to make a whole bunch of noise, make it look like something's going on, but they don't have any real ammunition. Last thing I need to do is give them ammunition against the child of God and the work of God. That would be some credible ammunition to say, you see, they're fake. So the children of Israel had to be careful how they respond here. There's nothing that Sanballat would love more than for all of them to leave the work and just start attacking those that are verbally attacking them. But that's not their job. Their job is not to attack the opposition. Their job is to finish the wall. But they are facing great opposition of severe nature. Now, I will say this, and then we'll be done. Sanballat, in his initial attack, and of course Tobiah joining in verse 1 and 2 and verse 3, is a heart issue. He attacks through three emotions: anger, indignation, and mockery. And these are the same emotions displayed by the world today, as we mentioned. But then he attacks in word. The emotions never stay bottled up for long. They always reveal themselves in words through actions. And the thoughts of the heart are revealed through words of the mouth. And we know that from Luke 6:45. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of the evil treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is evil. For of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. Which is, again, I go back, and a message I've preached, I think I preached it here before, but the abundance is revealing. It doesn't say out of the heart the mouth speaketh. It says out of the abundance of the heart, which means when it's coming out the mouth, it's because the heart's already full and it's overflowing. That's why it's not being held back, because I've allowed myself to be filled with these thoughts, these irritations, these frustrations. I've allowed myself to be filled, and I've meditated, and I've gotten irritated, and now I am going to bleh. That was Sanballat against the Jews. By the way, It's what Sanballat wanted Nehemiah and the Jewish people to do as well. Let's just start throwing knives back and forth at each other. Because as long as you're focused on throwing words back and forth, you don't get any work done. And so the discouragement or the distraction, either way, Sanballat would have been happy. But he reveals the abundance of his heart. Tobiah reveals the abundance of his heart. And yet Nehemiah and the people also reveal their abundance. What were they focused on? We got work to do. We don't have time for this. We're not going to waste time on this. Let them say what they're going to say. Nothing we say is going to stop it. Let's just get to work. Now, once this conflict is revealed, God's people do react with great spiritual fortitude. And we will, next Wednesday, believe it or not, we got 3 verses. And next Wednesday, we will cover the rest, okay? Because it all flows pretty quickly together once we get into what they did. But when we look at what the children of Israel did to combat the fight against them just obeying God and being faithful to the work, when we see what they did, we also learn what we should do every time we face the adversary. And the adversary can be in the form of people. But they're just pawns in Satan's game. He's the real adversary. They're just pawns. But it can be in the form of people. It can be in the form of situations and environment. And it just be in the form of things that happen that Satan himself can throw our way in order to try to sideline us. And so all these things, we're going to see how did the children of Israel deal with this attack in the mid-process of obeying God and rebuilding the walls and the gates of Jerusalem. We'll look at what their process of dealing with it is next Wednesday. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for tonight.